Ladies and gentlemen, this is Brian Powell, semi-live from the studio here at Splendor Media. Welcome, Jasmin Kim and Hunter Simon Lucas. Thank you for joining me. Last episode, we explored a little bit of the updates with Microsoft pouring a lot of money into ChatGPT and now integrating it with their search engine Bing. And further to that, we found that ChatGPT is a liar.
Known liar.
I want to ask you a little bit. So, during our last segment, we found that there, and I think we've all had some experiences with inaccuracies in ChatGPT's results. How have you seen ChatGPT in large in affecting the university, and also in light of these types of errors? Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I will say that like the first real use of ChatGPT that I personally have utilized in college came for outlining an essay. And so rather than like actually have it write it for me, I was just using it to kind of find sources for me on the internet. And for me, that was a little bit of a challenge because a lot of the professors require you to be really specific with where you pull your work. And so then you have to have the little battle with ChatGPT about where it pulled its work from. So that way you can go in and actually find those sources that it's quoting. So I will say that in writing, it's very useful. It's able to take complicated prompts and make them into something that covers all the different pieces of the point. But in terms of maybe more engineering classes or mathematical, I think that it struggles quite a bit compared to those writing classes. And even with the writing, honestly, I've noticed that sometimes what it writes is a little bit more simple than what I would want. And so I have to go in and actually flesh out the sentences like one by one or things like that. And so
Can you give it a prompt or tell it to be more technical or to be more fleshed out, or have you tried doing that?
I have, yes. And it sometimes works, but it seems to add more filler words than actually using anything technical that would suffice for maybe a college level, like technical writing class.
Interesting.
And what does it say when you ask it to cite sources? Does it give you the website that it pulled stuff from, or?
I wish it did. It's more of it quotes.
Welcome to Bing.
Yeah, exactly.
The new Bing.
The new Bing. It's more that it gives you kind of the name of the source. So like the Society of Engineers or things like that. Like it would do it on a broader scale
So then you would have to go to that website maybe to try to find it?
Track it down. Yeah. I will say that one cool thing about ChatGPT that I have noticed when comparing it to other AIs is it's able to take previous inputs and utilize them in more
Contextually,
inputs. Yeah, contextually down the road. And so that's really helpful for, like there's a writing class that I'm in right now, and the professor wants us to do our final report, but she wants us to go through and do all of these like essays leading up to the final report. And so it's nice to be able to take a previous essay and copy and paste that into ChatGPT and then say, now from this, what are your thoughts on this topic? And then I'll actually read through that previous essay and then spit out what it thinks about the new input. And I've noticed it with other apps like Write Sonic, they put a character limit actually on their inputs. So you can't copy and paste an essay in there.
I find the same actually with ChatGPT. I've tried to.
It used to be you could just paste as much text as you wanted, but I think they recently rolled back some of the capabilities and nerfed it, so to speak, so you can't put as much, right?
Yeah, it's definitely limited. I've tried to use it to summarize a string of back and forths, and I ran out of room and I had to like dissect it. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I have to read through all
I wonder if you could say this is part one and then paste and then say, and then this is part two, and now analyze them both.
Leverage the contextual abilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
That's smart, yeah.
Still, I wonder if that's like the ultimate downsides that might lead you to like paying the money for the actual service, right?
Yeah. And
Always.
another thing too is if they had it on the actual service, that they would give you like where they pulled the source from, like the actual website.
That would be
that. Yeah, no, you're
definitely
right.
worth it for
But then,
me.
but then they might be in direct competition with Bing, which is pouring money into them, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Are they two separate things, or is it the same? Is it ChatGPT that is being used in Bing?
I think it's ChatGPT
Okay.
using in Bing. Microsoft's poured something like $10 billion into funding this. I think ChatGPT is used sourcing, what do you call it, monies from various sources the whole time, to make this kind of stuff happen. But now they're like getting all of a sudden, hey, we're actually worth lots of money. Was it 29 billion or
So if they're in
maybe more than that,
competition, do you
79?
think they would turn off ChatGPT and then in favor of Bing instead if it's the same thing and it's...
Well, no, because I think that's the whole concept of the APIs, right? Like, I don't know if if Microsoft is going to get exclusive access. I think the whole concept of API, to be able to have the different softwares talk and use this service. If I, as an individual, wanted my app to use ChatGPT, for instance, in my game, if I had a game, maybe when you're in a little village and you're talking to the villager might be actually intelligent, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate model. I don't think, from what I know, I don't think Microsoft owns any real piece, but I don't know.
So the Bing will just be like a different iteration of ChatGPT and just used in a different way as a search engine as opposed to like conversation or I don't know.
I think so. So from back to the university stuff, does your professors, have they addressed ChatGPT?
Yeah. So that's interesting, and I was kind of curious to see too what their response would have been had this come at the start of COVID when we were all moving online. I think that now that they're more used to online classes and just trying to look out for plagiarism in general, the professors have gotten a little bit more wise as to how they can combat these things. My materials science professor was worried about it, and so he made the test a whole lot of questions in a short amount of time, hoping that we wouldn't have time to copy and paste. And so at that point, I'm wondering, is it actually going to be detrimental to critical thinking in those types of classes? Or if it's going to be like...
The actual test scenario is now...
And it just makes it a lot harder, too, for just anybody to answer the questions, whether if you're not using ChatGPT, which is sort of not fair.
That's going to encourage people to cheat more often, actually, because people that already have test anxiety, when they see that they have to take 40 questions in 30 minutes, I mean, that's going to make their anxiety even worse.
Well, let's get a little more philosophical. Is it really cheating if there's a tool that enables you to do these things, to answer these things? We, I think, as engineers, we recognize that most tests are already open book, realizing that there's too much data to be able to sift through if you didn't at least have some semblance of understanding of the subject matter. So we realize that using a calculator or a textbook, it's just a tool to help you exact that task. Well, ChatGPT is a new tool.
It's kind of like going back to the idea of it, you need to be able to write a good prompt in order to get good output. It's like you need to be able to figure out how to approach a situation or ask good questions and understand it, critically think. And so, just using a tool doesn't mean that you're cheating.
Yeah.
Because in the real world, you would have access to that anyway.
But then that might fundamentally shift the way that we do schooling, right? It's like, how do you actually gauge a person's intellect, their ability to critically think?
And I feel like people are going to start having the same mindset of the 100 and 200 level like engineering classes that they do of like algebra, where algebra is teaching you how to like multiply and divide in all these ways. And you're like, I can just use a calculator for a lot of this stuff. Why am I doing this?
This is true.
And so I wonder if a lot of people are going to start viewing the 100 and 200 level engineering classes as I could just use ChatGPT to do this. Why do I need to do this?
But I think you still have to have a fundamental understanding of a subject matter to even steer the tools to enable yourself to do an actual task, right? I mean, if you're a structures engineer analyzing damage on something, or allowables for materials, you have to even know that is a thing. Like material properties, you have to know that stuff. You can't just be like, I'm here. I got into this company, and they're asking me a question, like, or they're they're handing me an assignment. I still have to be able to critically think to do it, even with the better, powerful tools that make me do it faster.
And that's kind of why I made the distinction between the 100 and 200 level classes and the 300 and 400s, because I think once you hit 300 and 400, you're actually taking those simpler concepts from 100 and 200 and utilizing them in a longer report or a longer analysis. But for the 100 and 200, I mean, a lot of it's just true or false questions or things like that, where you're not necessarily going to need to critically think much beyond ChatGPT's capabilities.
Okay, so 100, 200s are like the entry level. I'm not familiar with that numbering scheme. So 100, 200, and then it gets more advanced. Okay. You're saying that some professors are, making a test faster or figuring out ways they're more familiar with online presence of individuals since COVID. Are there anybody who's talking more like embracing it? Like, I'm a professor. I realize that this is like good or could be good. Do they see the good? I mean,
I wish that was the case, but I think right now most of them are in threat mode, and they're worried about it taking away a lot of those kinds of easy, monotonous assignments that they give us that we know are monotonous.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too early in the process of it having released, and then maybe in a year or two they'll just accept that it's part of it and then try to restructure their courses around it and just assume that everyone's going to be using it and just try to make it, different.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everyone's using computers now.
Right, or the internet.
We're not picking up the pencil anymore. We're learning that in the very, very early stages, but we're ultimately picking up a computer with a keyboard and putting our stuff.
Or like Wolfram Alpha. I don't know if you ever used that,
A little bit.
But back when I was like taking calculus or some of these, more complicated math classes, you had this tool that you could use, and it would just literally tell you the exact steps of how to work out the problem. And even though it could do that, you still needed to kind of understand how to get there. So I really liked using that as a tool to see each step-by-step process of how to do it. So it's kind of just the same thing.
Yeah. It's all the tools in the bag. I understand you have a fiance. Have you heard from her? Have you heard from her? She's also in school, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard from her any perspectives that would be interesting to share?
I think that, so she's fully online. But
fully online, okay.
Yeah, I know that she is kind of against the whole. I'm more of the taking the easy route in some areas.
Interesting.
And she's interested in her classes. A lot of hers are the senior level biology classes where maybe it would require a lot of research.
Something died.
Thank you so much for joining for this segment. I appreciate it very much. And I look forward to seeing you all next time.
再见.
If any of this makes it into the final cut, well, I apologize. That means I probably liked it.
Yeah.
So I think we'll just do a quick restart just in case.